Life as a female politician can be trying at times.
Is there a point of order?
I'd like to call the Honorable Minister Lindiwe Zulu to stop singing in the House, or she must be referred to the Powers and Privileges Committee. She's chanting yes, number one. She's distracting.
Known for her feistiness,
Chairperson, point of order. My name is Lindiwe Daphne Zulu. The one who refers to me, Ginger, the ginger shall be outside.
and never one to shy away from conflict.
Now, if he said to you, okay, Minister, see you outside, would you have taken it outside?
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. Anytime.
Minister Lindiwe Zulu has risen through the ranks of the African National Congress to become a prominent staple in the movement's leadership structures. But red carpet fashions and political antics aside, Lindiwe Zulu's journey to the benches of parliament was filled with many challenges. Being a woman in South Africa's liberation movement was far from glamorous. As the 1976 uprisings raged in South Africa, a teenage Zulu, then living in Swaziland, joined the African National Congress. Her political affiliation meant that she needed to leave her 2 young children behind. While in exile, Zulu was encouraged by stalwart Moses Mabhida and others to further her education. She went on to obtain a master's degree in journalism in Moscow, where she also mastered the Russian language. Zulu joined the armed wing of the ANC, Umkhonto weSizwe, in 1987 in Angola, where she would receive full military training. She was also one of only 2 women in the eNCA camps at the time. There, she would meet her husband, Tsile Ituleng, a marriage that survived the turbulent political times and endures today, 30-odd years later. Zulu returned to South Africa in the early 90s, where she would become head of communications for the ANC Women's League and form part of the party's communications team during the country's transition in 1994. Many positions in the party followed, including a stint as ambassador in Brazil, eventually being appointed as Minister of Small Business Development in 2014. Now at 61, the current Minister of Social Development shows no signs of slowing down in her political career, but also makes up for lost time by doting on her children and grandchildren. She invited us into her Johannesburg home to meet the family and to have a frank conversation about her life, the struggle, perseverance, and the hope she holds for the country she sacrificed so much for. Could we say that that was the beginning of political consciousness when you got to Swaziland? And I must ask you, how so in a monarchy?
Let's take it back to my grandparents who worked in Johannesburg almost all their lives. They both moved to Johannesburg. My grandmother, who was the matriarch of the family, because not only did she take care of her own children, but as well as my own children when I left and went into exile as way back as in 1979. But I'm taking it back there because being born in South Africa and being forced to move and go and live in Swaziland, that's where the story begins of my journey in as far as the liberation struggle is concerned. But that consciousness of what is South Africa, what is happening in South Africa, started from the time that we traveled from KZN to Manzini, Swaziland, with my grandmother in a truck, packed with all the little possessions that we had, with my 2 brothers. The journey starts with the very grandparents who made it possible for us by explaining to us their life in Johannesburg, the hardships that they had to face, and my grandmother ultimately leaving Johannesburg to go back to KZN, and my grandfather remaining in Johannesburg and living in hostels for more than 50 years. So the consciousness about South Africa being liberated came from my grandparents who were hoping and wishing that one day South Africa would be free.
When did you meet the African National Congress?
After 1976 uprisings and all, many of the students, if I can say that, who left South Africa in 1976 onwards, went to live in Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland. And us being in Swaziland, my grandmother, being a Catholic and an active Catholic, and being known that we originally a South African family, had to keep some of them. So that's where I met with many of the students that had run away, who were then residing by our home, because there was no refugee camp at that time. Refugee camp was provided later on, where all those that were running away from the apartheid regime had to leave before they decided what they wanted to do with their lives, either going to school or joining Umkhonto weSizwe. So my meeting with the African National Congress was those activists of the time who then recruited me into the African National Congress as way back as 1978.
So these were individuals that were staying in your home and they were activists. They recruited you. And at the time, did you have children?
Yes, at the time I had these two beautiful daughters that you see today. I think they were aged 3 and 4, or 4 and 3. But of course, by the time I was recruited into the African National Congress, I was at college in Swaziland. And my grandmother was the one who was taking care of these two sitting next to me.
Well, they'll always be your girls, right?
Yeah, they'll always be my girls, yeah. So I left them with my grandmother because when I joined the liberation struggle, there were activities that needed to be done, underground work that was being done by the cadres who were there. The African National Congress had to be sure that you are joining the ANC for right reasons.
And that you're not a spy.
Yeah, and that you're not a spy. You had to write your biography. You had to write it so many times. You had to explain yourself. You had to give them your background before they were convinced that you were one of the right people to join the African National Congress. And then the journey begins there, when then, because I was forced to leave, my grandparents didn't even know where I was. I left the children, went to Mozambique, stayed in Mozambique a little while. That's where we started.
I think that we need to bring context to how old you were. I mean, we're speaking as though you were a woman in her 30s who was making a conscious decision about leaving the children and going into exile. How old were you?
I was 19 years old. And this is where I also think we need to put everything into context, because I'm hoping that the young girls of today will not fall into the same trap of falling pregnant at 15, having a child at 16, and falling pregnant again for the second time, when my grandparents were doing everything to make sure that I got educated. That's the message that I think is very important for me for the future. It might be looking very pleasant now that I have the girls, they're now big women, they have children of their own. But if we were to reverse it back and look at how I got pregnant and ended up with children at that early age, is something that we need to change as a nation. Adults must have children when they are capable of taking care of them. I was in no position of taking care of children. So that was an extra burden on my grandparents. It's exciting to have them now. That's why, for me, taking care of my grandchildren and making sure that I make them take care of their own children is what I think should be the message to all South Africans, especially young girls. Don't do it when it's not necessary. You're putting a burden on somebody else that's not ready for it.
You left them to go to exile when you ended up in Mozambique, Tanzania, then you went over to Angola, and then it was Russia. So how did you get to that decision where you've got this 2 or 3-year-old and 4-year-old in the house, and you're making a conscious decision that today I'm going to leave you, and I'm going to leave you for 14 years, and you're not going to see me for 14 years, but I'm going to leave you as a mom?
I wasn't a mom. I was just a teenager. I wasn't a mom in the full sense of being a mom, because if you're a mom and you are appreciating your responsibility and your role in bringing up your own children, chances of you stepping up and going somewhere are very slim, Because I don't think they would do that, these two today. They love their kids. They've taken care of their kids day in, day out. So I wasn't a mom. I was just somebody that had 2 children, and that's it. Having them was secondary. The first thing was, okay, they're talking about liberation struggle. They're talking about our history as South Africa. It's taking me back to what my own grandparents kept on saying, my grandmother in particular, who used to say her own life shouldn't have been what it was as a domestic worker in Johannesburg. She was a domestic worker in Johannesburg, somewhere in Parktown, because she was a very fancy lady, and they will tell you that she was just one of those women that made sure that when you leave home, you are speak and span, and that's it. And she decided none of her children are going to be domestic workers. None of her grandchildren will ever set foot in anybody's house and be cleaning and doing that. So she instilled that in us, that one day things will be different because I'm giving you this education. So it wasn't difficult for me to leave them because I wasn't a mother. I didn't have what it takes to be a full mother with an appreciation. I had just had 2 children. That was it. So I left. It was after coming across other mothers like me who had also left their children behind. That's when it started dawning on me.
And
2
what
children.
are you doing here?
No, what you are doing here was always there because the ANC had assisted us to appreciate the importance of participating in the liberation struggle. You just commit yourself and do it. You will see the results after. So the whole issue of who we were, where we came from, what had we been doing was not the immediate thing. When the liberation comes, then your children and your grandchildren and the children to come will be in a better environment. That's what kept us. But being a mother, I wasn't a mother. I didn't have it. I didn't feel it. I wasn't a mother because I got children too early in life to appreciate what it is to be a mother. So I admire them when I see them. Sorry. So sorry.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Pindi, how do you feel hearing your mom speak about the price that she had to pay for freedom and knowing that she made a conscious decision to leave you as children?
I'm actually very excited this afternoon because promise you, since they came back from exile, we've never sat down to talk about what exactly she went through as a mother. This opens a lot of talks because there's many of the South Africans who left to go and fight for us to be where we are today. It wasn't easy. It was very difficult. It was a nightmare, I know. I wasn't there, but I know because I've got children. But I'm very happy that this is where we're sitting today. All these fighters who went out there need to write books, need to tell the story. There's so many things that South Africans don't know what happened in exile. There is so much that they don't know. I mean, I went to these schools and I remember they used to call me all sorts of names because my mother was in parliament. They were clueless about how did she get to that. It's our responsibility to pull it out there for the world to know, for the world to see, because what the world knows is very far from what exactly it is and it was. So it's up to us to change it. They have done their part. They have brought the trophy home. And what do we do with the trophy? We have to take the batons on. My dear sister, I think you'll agree with me on that one.
No, Tula, was it difficult? I mean, you're the eldest. Was it difficult growing up without a mother? I mean, she missed a lot. 14 years is not a joke. And to know that you have her, and yet she's not at school. She's not there when you come home from school. She's not there during the difficult time. She's not there when you're becoming a teenager. She's not there on your birthdays. How was that for you?
That was very hard. It was very hard not knowing if she will ever come back. Because our grandmother used to tell us it's not a joke where they are. It was hard, really hard.
Have you forgiven her for leaving?
Of course, yes.
I don't think I think it's beyond forgiving.
Yeah, it's
because,
more than
especially
forgiveness.
because we see her, we've seen the success that she has become, the influences that she's instilled in us after coming back. I think we can find another word to define it. Forgiving is...
It's a light word.
It's something to really...
Yeah.
Sorry, but yeah, it's just...
It's nothing compared to what...
It's absolutely
nothing.
She's done so much for the family, for the country. We understand that she went away not for the family. She went away for the nation.
Those were the sacrifices that needed to be made, and I think we have not healed. What we're doing here today is something that needs to be done with hundreds of other families.